thousands of years before the first maps, before ships crossed oceans, before empires connected continents. Humanity kept drawing the same impossible thing: different languages, different religions, different worlds, civilizations separated by deserts, mountains, and entire oceans, all imagined the same extraordinary structure, not merely a sacred tree, a tree standing at the very center of existence itself. Its branches reached the heavens, its roots descended into darkness. Some believed it carried the souls of the dead. Others believed it held the stars in place. Some claimed it fed the gods. Others said it existed before the gods had names. There is only one problem. Most of these civilizations never met. There was no shared language, no common religion, no global empire, no known way for one story to travel so far. Historians have proposed several explanations: trade, migration, independent invention. Each accounts for part of the pattern. None accounts for all of it, because the closer archaeologists looked, the stranger this pattern became. It's possible this was never the story of one civilization or one religion. Some researchers now argue it may be the story of an idea that humanity kept rediscovering again and again across thousands of years. The oldest surviving depiction we've found so far does not come from Scandinavia or Greece or Egypt. It comes from much earlier, between the Tigris and the Euphrates, in the land we now call Mesopotamia. If this pattern has a beginning, this is where we'd expect to find it: southern Mesopotamia, the cradle of cities, the birthplace of writing, the place where history first learned to record itself. Around 3200 BCE, in the city of Uruk, that record begins. More than 5,000 years ago, the people of Sumer filled their temples with a remarkable image: a great tree, perfectly balanced, its roots anchored below, its branches reaching above, standing at the center of the ordered universe. Today, archaeologists usually call it the Tree of Life. The people who carved it left no single explanation. Instead, they left hundreds of fragments, each revealing a different piece of the same idea. By now, if you're starting to notice a pattern too, that's exactly where this is going. Stay with it. Some scenes associate the tree with kingship, others with fertility, others with divine order. Its meaning shifts, its appearance barely changes. That alone is unusual for a symbol this old. Symbols usually evolve, languages change, religions transform, icons simplify or disappear entirely. This one does neither. The earliest surviving examples already appear remarkably developed. There's no clearly primitive version in the archaeological record. No obvious early prototype has survived. Whatever came before hasn't been found yet, which raises a fair question. If this isn't the beginning, where did the idea come from, whatever the tree represented? The Sumerians already understood it completely, which only deepens the mystery of where it began. 1,000 years later, another civilization adopted a strikingly similar image. But this time, the tree no longer stood at the center of the universe. It stood at the threshold of death. More than 1,000 years after the first sacred trees appeared in Mesopotamia, another civilization adopted a remarkably similar idea, not beside the Euphrates, but beside the Nile. And here, the tree's purpose changed. For the ancient Egyptians, death was never simply an ending. It was a journey, a dangerous crossing through a landscape unlike our own. The duat. According to Egyptian funerary texts, the soul traveled through darkness, past guardians, past gates, past a series of trials, until it reached something unexpected. Not a throne, not a temple, a tree. Once again, this was no ordinary tree. It nourished the dead, protected travelers, offered water, where none should exist. Its branches became shelter, its roots a promise of renewal. Egyptologists have documented this image in dozens of New Kingdom tombs, painted again and again across centuries. The goddess Hathor emerging from the trunk, offering life to those who had already died. Mesopotamia gave humanity a cosmic tree. Egypt transformed it into a bridge between worlds, different civilization, different language, different religion, the same vertical idea. If the story ended here, trade might explain it, ideas travel, empires expand, symbols change hands along the way. But then, the pattern crossed an ocean, to a civilization with no recorded contact with either Egypt or Mesopotamia, and somehow, they were already imagining the same tree. For decades, some historians assumed the pattern could be explained by contact. Ideas travel, merchants travel, empires expand. But archaeologists eventually began comparing cultures with no plausible route of contact at all. No caravans crossed this ocean before the Common Era. No fleets connected these worlds. No empire carried their religions across it. And still, the same structure appears. The Maya called it the Ceiba. To them, it stood at the very center of creation. Its roots reached the underworld, Xibalba. Its trunk belonged to humanity. Its crown supported the heavens. This wasn't merely a sacred plant. For the Maya, it was the architecture of reality itself. Every direction, every kingdom, every journey after death began from its trunk. Look closely at the details. The species changes, the gods change, even the language changes completely. But the underlying structure remains almost untouched. Now let's go further east. Another civilization with no contact with Mesoamerica whatsoever imagined something just as striking. Not a tree growing upward, a tree growing both ways. In the Bhagavad Gita, composed sometime between the 5th and 2nd century BCE, the universe itself is described as an inverted tree, the Ashvatha. Its roots exist beyond ordinary perception. Everything we experience grows downward, from something unseen. Egypt asked how souls travel. Mesopotamia asked how order exists. India asked where reality begins. 3 different questions, 1 recurring answer: a tree. At this point, the coincidence is hard to dismiss. The question isn't whether these civilizations imagined a similar structure. The evidence suggests they clearly did. The real question is why humanity kept returning to the same shape, across cultures with no contact, across thousands of years. Of every version we've found so far, one civilization refused to let the tree stay silent. Far to the north, it started to speak. 2 manuscripts preserve almost everything we know about this tree: the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda, both written down in Iceland in the 13th century, centuries after the oral tradition behind them began. The Norse didn't invent the world tree. By every indication, they inherited an idea already ancient by the time it reached them. They called it Yggdrasil, not simply a tree. The tree, the structure said to hold reality together. Its roots reached places no living person could see. Its branches stretched beyond the heavens. Every world had its place somewhere upon it. Gods, humans, giants, the dead, 9 worlds sharing one living structure. The 9 worlds weren't separate universes, they were neighbors, connected not by roads or rivers but by one immense living axis. Everything depended on the same tree. Beneath one root lay the well of wisdom. Beneath another, the waters of creation. Beneath the deepest, something waited, patiently. The texts call it Nidhogg, endlessly gnawing at the roots of the world, not out of malice, simply doing what it had always done. In this cosmology, decay was part of creation itself. High above, an eagle watched the heavens. Between them, a messenger carried words from one extreme of existence to the other. Even conflict belonged to the same living system. Here's what sets the Norse version apart from everyone that came before it. It was never static. It grew, it suffered, it aged like every living thing, like every civilization, like every human life. Different trees, different myths, different worlds, yet somehow they all describe a strikingly similar architecture, not identical stories, a shared underlying structure. That may be one of the most compelling coincidences in comparative mythology, which raises a different kind of question. Maybe humanity wasn't copying the same story from one another. Maybe humanity kept recognizing the same pattern independently. After thousands of years, one question still stands. Why a tree? Why not a mountain or a tower or a river? Why did civilization after civilization choose exactly the same living form? One explanation researchers point to. No other living thing marks time quite like a tree does. Every year it appears to die. Every year it returns, without moving, without resisting. Roots, rivers, lightning, veins, neurons. Nature keeps returning to the same branching architecture, the same rules producing the same shape, over and over. Scientists today have a name for this: fractal, self-organizing branching systems, patterns that solve complex problems through simple, repeated rules. Ancient people didn't have that vocabulary. They didn't need it. They lived inside the pattern every day and drew what they saw. Maybe they weren't copying one another after all. Maybe they were simply observing the same world. Imagine for a moment that every one of these civilizations was wrong. No sacred ash, no cosmic sycamore, no divine Ceiba, no tree of life. Even then, the real mystery would remain. Why did humanity keep drawing this shape for more than 5,000 years, long after empires, languages, and entire religions disappeared? Maybe because every generation meets a tree long before it ever learns a civilization's mythology. A child doesn't need a myth to recognize shelter, roots, or branches reaching toward light. The image speaks before the language does. A tree connects what's hidden with what's visible, what's buried with what reaches the sky. Perhaps that has always been its real meaning. The deepest mystery here was never whether the world tree existed as a single, shared belief. The deepest mystery is why humanity has never fully stopped imagining it. Some ideas, it seems, can't simply be passed down. They have to be rediscovered by every generation on its own. And maybe that's exactly why the oldest surviving symbol we keep finding still feels unexpectedly familiar. If the world tree shows how an idea can outlive the civilization that first imagined it, this next object shows something just as strange. An object built to physically survive, sealed in stone for over 3,000 years, so that one man's name would never be forgotten. Not a weapon, not a crown, something built to outlast time itself. The Egyptians placed theirs inside a sealed tomb, hidden beneath layers of stone, protected for more than 3,000 years. Not simply because it was valuable, because it was meant to make sure something survived. If the world tree preserved humanity's oldest question, this object may preserve one of its oldest answers.